What's good, Super Riders? Riding balance lines is not about luck or even repetition. Today we're going to learn the technique of riding balance lines. Before we get into the actual technique of riding balance lines, let's talk about your balance line to start with. So a lot of people will use curbs, they'll use a log, anything that you can practice on, and there are a few different criteria that you want to be thinking about as you start. I actually have a portable version here. I made this out of some 4x4 lumber, which is pretty sturdy, but it's light enough that it can be portable. I can move it around the warehouse if I need to. One of the main things that I'm looking for when I want to practice a balance line, I want to find something that's short enough that if I fall off, my disc brake isn't going to land on it and hit and bend. So that's the number one criteria that I have. It's got to be small enough, especially when I'm first starting to practice, that I'm not going to land on my disc brake if I fall off. The next thing we want to think about is the area around the balance line. We want to make sure it's super clear on both sides and in front and behind the balance line, because you may bail a few times. You may step off the bike or hop off, and you want to make sure that it's clear, that you're not going to crash and then crash again. So make sure everything around it, there's plenty of room for you to step off when necessary. One other thing that I've added to my balance beam is I've actually stacked the wood on top of each other, and the reason for that is so that I have to ride up onto it, which can make it more challenging. You don't have to go this high. You could actually just push it back and have it be this tall, or you could push it up against a curve. That way you just roll right onto it. The thing is, when it comes to learning balance lines, you don't have to even have a balance beam. You can do it on curbs, you can do it on logs, you can do it on painted lines on the ground. There's so many ways for you to just get started with this process. Especially if you're in the neighborhood, you can roll up onto the curb by the little driveway thing and then try not to land in the grass or not to fall into the street. That's how I actually started doing it. We've talked about the actual balance line. Now it's time to get into the technique of balancing. There are 5 different things that I want to talk about when it comes to the technique of balancing your bike on balance line. So number 1 is going to be, look at the end of the beam when you're riding. It goes like this. Where your eyes go is where the bike goes. And so you want to be focused on exactly where the bike is going to end up, not down at the wheel. If you're looking down at the wheel to make sure you're on balance, you're absolutely going to steer the bike off to the side. If you look to the end of where you're going, the bike is going to follow. Number 2 goes back to how you learned to walk on balance beams as a kid, and it's making your body as wide as possible. So you're going to push your knees out and you're going to push your elbows out. Make yourself low and wide to balance on the line. Now, the secondary thing that's going to come from this is that you're going to use your knees and your hips to balance over the bike and over the line. That's where all of your balance and movement is going to come. You're going to be shifting your knees and your hips to stay over that balance line. Number 3 is to keep your momentum when you're riding on the balance line. It actually gets harder to ride balance lines the slower you go. Typically when we ride and we want to be careful with our riding, we slow things down. But when it comes to riding on balance lines, when you slow down, you get twitchier with that front wheel, and it makes it a lot easier to fall off the line. So if you're riding a line, you want to ride with as much momentum as you safely can. When you're practicing and drilling your balance lines, especially if you have a line like I have here, I will go intentionally slower than I traditionally would to try to build up my balance skill and to make my front wheel less twitchy at slower speeds, but that comes a little bit later. When you're first getting balance lines down, you want to try to keep as much momentum as you safely can. Number 4, keep your center of gravity as low as you possibly can. Normally when we ride, we have our pedals flat, and so we're on this stable surface. But a lot of times when people ride balance lines, they'll actually rotate one pedal down to the bottom so that they can sink their weight even deeper into the bike. So you may try that, the difference of how you feel when you're riding with your pedals level versus when you rotate one down as low as it can possibly go. You may find this is a good hack for your balance. Number 5, have an exit plan. So ideally, before you ride a balance line, you've checked both sides of the balance line to know where the safest area is for you to potentially bail, to hop off the bike. And you want to have that in mind. You don't want to be looking in that direction while you're riding because, like we originally said, your bike goes where your eyes go. But in your periphery, you should know where the safest place is to bail if you absolutely need to. Now feels like a good time to talk to you about bailing off balance lines, and this is something that you should probably practice as you're working on this skill in general, because sometimes things don't go according to plan and you need to be able to safely exit the line. So we're going to talk a bit more about what needs to go into that. 3 things come to mind when we talk about bailing off a balance line, and number 1 is going to be jumping off both the right side and the left side of the line with a simple hop. I made a video called Hop Your Bike, which is going to be really handy for learning how to hop your bike off the right and the left side. You should probably be practicing this as you're practicing riding the line. Just ride halfway down and then hop to the right. Then start over, ride halfway down, hop off to the left. You want to be proficient in this part of it because, like I said, things don't always go according to plan, and if you don't know how to bail, it makes it way scarier to ride balance lines. If you're confident and comfortable bailing, it makes it a lot easier because the stakes just aren't as high if you know that you can safely jump off the line. Number 2, and I talked about this a little bit, but you want to be able to spot where the landing areas are. Ideally, before you ride the balance line, you've kind of taken note in your brain of where the safest spots are. You want to have it in your peripheral vision where the easiest and safest place is to jump. But try not to look there because, like I said before, your bike goes where your eyes go. And if you're looking at the area that you're about to crash into, that's exactly where your bike is going to go. So try to keep your eyes focused on where you're trying to go, but have in your peripheral vision an idea of where those safest places are to bail. Maybe the most important thing, and especially when you're practicing this, is that both wheels need to leave the balance line at the same time. I see so many people crashing where they jump off and one wheel drops faster than the other. So when you hop off of a balance line, try to pull both wheels up and off at the same time. Again, go back to that video about hopping your bike. That's going to come in really handy here. You don't want to just lift a back or a front wheel and have the other one drop down, because that's exactly what's going to happen. And especially when you're at height, that can get really dangerous. So make sure that when you practice, both wheels are coming off at the same time, and then you want to land with your back wheel first to have the smoothest and softest landing. Now that you're on your way with balance lines, the next thing you probably want to learn in your progression is how to hop your bike so that you can safely exit the balance lines. And the video for that is right here.